Here we are.
Sincerely. Hey, we're here.
We're here. You are in Florida. This conversation with Bert is totally awesome. I'm really
Now,
excited
Bert,
for this.
Bert's awesome, man. He's awesome. He's like like, he's like the Papa Bear of my career. Like he really is.
Without
That
people
to
like
me.
this, so mine is a woman named Joan, but without people like that push you out on the diving board, and they're like, you can go ahead, jump in. Uh, yeah, it
But to
doesn't
do it
happen.
in a kind of
It doesn't happen.
and doing it in a loving, caring way too.
Yeah.
Like one thing I really appreciate about Bert is that like he actually does not treat everyone the same. Right, and that is an amazing skill as a leader, right? The army, well, anyway, he does not treat everyone the same. He's very much, he curates his interactions with people like
That's a
based
good
on.
point. It's a good point. I think you sort of have to. There was a sales leader at a company I worked at, and I hated this guy. But one of the few things that he said that I agreed with was he said, if you are to his sales team, he said, if you are selling a lot of software, you're going to get more of my attention. Just flat out, you are. If you're not selling software, you're not going to get as much of my attention. And I think that rings true. That doesn't mean you're rude to people, but like that rings true for legal. Like think about when you've run a commercial team or you're doing the commercial deals. Of course, your salespeople that are cranking and are busy and are like asking you pointed questions and are pushing back in the right way, of course they get your attention, and that's probably what Bert's MO, I'm guessing from our conversation,
Yeah,
is going to be, I support you because you're leaning in.
yeah, I think it's more than that too, by the way. Like I also think Bert has tremendous compassion. So if he sees you're in a tough spot or not meeting your potential, he'll pick you up, man. Like he's just good at this. He's a very compassionate person, and this is why I call him the Papa Bear, because like I, for example, I worked with Bert for 6 years. I have a strong personality. I worked 5 or 6 years, um, and I've known Bert now 7 or 8 years, whatever it is. Uh, I've never seen Bert like lose his cool. I've never seen Bert like I've definitely seen him be frustrated, and of course, but like never seen his demeanor be hostile ever, not one time. And we worked at Oracle in the trenches doing commercial deals, like quarter end quotas and demands, and just never. Like I definitely can be like, whatever, like flustered, but like he's just not like that. And to your point about like attention, the sales analogy lands in some ways, but not in others, because like his attention will be on you if you're being really successful and helping you amplify that, but it'll also be there if like just had a rough month or a rough week, or you're just not tracking on something that needs some like additional refinement or
Yeah,
whatever
I
it is.
think the sales analogy needs expansion, so because I think
Yeah, yeah,
it's got to be, it's got to be people that want it. If
yeah,
they don't want it, then that was, so Bert made that point when we discussed it,
yeah,
that you have to, no one's going to look out for your career except for you, really.
yeah, yeah,
So if you're not looking out for your career, yourself, your life, your family, then you can't expect that from somewhere
yeah,
else.
yeah. No, that's exactly right. And yeah, I'm excited to ask Bert about his hair too. Like yeah, I know this is not the man's got the best head of hair, and he's now a full silver fox. So we'll be able to see Bert in all of his glory here in a minute. But just a good guy, man. And like one more thing I'll say about Bert is he's like a low key deep intellectual. Like he is like, and I'm sure this will come through when we talk to him in a few minutes. But like he is like a very methodical, calm thinker, and very careful about how and what he communicates, right? And what he says, like where I am a lot more from the hip, like Bert is very, I don't want to use the word calculated because that has a negative connotation, but he's very careful when he speaks that he's saying what he's thinking. And that is a tremendous skill that, I've learned from him on.
Still working on it, right? I mean, that's a
Thank
lifelong pursuit for me to be able to. So simple to think before you talk, but
you. Yeah,
not. It's not.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I've put my foot in my mouth plenty of times, and
Yep. Yep.
we'll do it in the future, I'm sure.
Uh,
But I don't want to keep you from the pool, man. Get to the
all right,
pool.
man. Let's get started.
All right, here we are. We're here with Data Protection Breakfast Club with Bert Kaminski at Google. And let's start, Pedro. Where are you right now?
Yeah, this is not a Zoom wallpaper. I'm home. I'm in Miami, and I'm working from the pool today.
Nice. It
Yeah, it's not so bad.
looks nice there. Well, Bert, where are you? Where are you talking to us from? New York?
From the New York area. Yeah, I haven't been away too far from here in a long time. And Andy, it's starting to get warm, but we've got some cold days, so I'm looking forward to taking a break and joining Pedro somewhere in Florida. Maybe it seems like the place to be.
I think that's a good move, and obviously people are looking to get to the warmer weather and get vaccinated and get moving around the country again, which will hopefully happen sometime this year. It'd be great.
Totally.
Yeah. Let's start with this. So Bert, you hired Pedro.
Before hold on, Andy. And Andy, hold. Before we get into like super substantive stuff, this is really important. Me and you've known each other a long time, and like as you can tell, my hair is doing what it's doing, and Andy's hair has been gone for some time. How does your hair get better every time I see you?
My hair gets lighter every time you see me, so I don't know about better. I've got it, but it's lighter. So
I earned hair in privacy.
Really? I think Lothar might disagree.
I'm a homer. I'm going with Bert. Anyway, just wanted to get that out of the way because it's like very important substantive material stuff. But now that we've got that out of the way, go ahead, Andy. Sorry.
Okay, well, Bert and his hair hired Pedro, and so I'm curious. Like, I know why I like Pedro, but you hired him. So, like, what brought you there, and what led you to that decision? Because I'm pretty sure, if I recall, you hired him out of a law firm, right? And that's not always like, not always the exact transition that in-house folks look for necessarily. They sometimes ask that question, will the person be able to do it?
Yeah, no, great question. And there's a lot of reasons why we would have why I hired Pedro for sure. But I want to give the context of this. Is that was the time, Andy, when the business, the legal model for supporting the cloud business was changing. Back then there wasn't really as much of a firm understanding. Now it's been a few years, but it wasn't a firm understanding of the difference between a dynamic emerging technology like cloud computing versus traditional licensing. So until the point where we hired Pedro and a number of other people around that time, the thought was that we would hire people and build a team under kind of a traditional in-house model where you're finding people who have done the same things before, and it's all kind of licensing type of work. But we found that didn't work at all for the new demands of this emerging business. So we did a couple of things. First of all, I took the whole rule book of the profiles, the type of people, the attributes we were looking for, and I put that aside. And then we also were getting many more people. So I wanted to make sure we had a team that was diverse in location, in background, educational experience, and that kind of thing. And Pedro was a fantastic candidate. And I loved him as a candidate because he was everything that was not the traditional in-house licensing lawyer. This is what we needed to build out a diverse team. And I mean diverse in the cognitive way as well. We needed people who have done a lot of different things in life.
One thing you did also, I believe, is that we also talked to Derek Zollner, who's now at Centro. And so this is all back at Oracle. And Mark Parton is also at Oracle. He's now the chief privacy officer, like, who's another friend of ours. But like, you've also, I think, brought in litigators, which I think is an interesting move to put them into not necessarily straight litigation roles. And so was that sort of the same thinking there? Like I'm gonna find a person that kind of fits what we need and think about that person as a whole.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. So litigators, and by the way, you might know, I used to litigate way back when. Litigators have great skills, right? They're very fast on their feet, very agile thinkers. They're advocates. They're excellent writers. They pick up new topics. They're very analytical. So there's very good skills in terms of litigators, and that's what we were looking for. We could teach the technology, we can teach the business model. This is stuff that you can learn on the job, but the fundamental skills of lawyering, and that depth of those attributes is something that we were looking for. We were looking to hire people and not resumes, and so Pedro was one example, but litigators at large, they had to be business minded, though. By the way, Andy, a key attribute of being in-house is, and especially in technology, it's got to be collaborative and forward-looking and business-minded and customer-centric, and all these good things. Anyone that had that edge, who was that kind of adverse, risk-averse, combative type of personality, would not have been a good fit. So it wasn't all litigators, but it was those who had those key skills, and we could teach the rest.
And to the point, Andy, you were making a second ago, and I had to move inside for the Wi-Fi, but if you look at Bert's Bert's Kevin Bacon degrees of separation chart, there's people have gone on to do amazing, incredible things. We've mentioned a few names, but I'll give you some others. Adam Huff, who is now in a super senior position at Oracle and has stayed there a long time. Denise Butler, who's on my team here at Facebook, doing incredible things. And there are folks that went to Google, where Bert is now, and folks that are general counsels, chief privacy officers, all over the place. Bert, your legacy of putting together talent and then somehow, well, not somehow, but the time on our team back at Oracle translating into bigger and better things for those people is a true testament to not just how you hired, who you hired, but also how working alongside you in an organization you're running really help people kind of advance their skills and make themselves marketable for really big challenge.
Yeah, I felt it was really important, Pedro. I don't know how, it's, I hope you saw it the same way, but I wanted to have a microculture for the team that we were on, that we could go and innovate, right? There were rules. There's always rules on how we had to handle issues and deals, but we were there to not just rinse and repeat, but we needed to push the boundaries of that. And by creating, I hope it was a safe zone for everyone, that this is, you guys, be unleashed, go out and handle and support your clients, be creative, be innovative. If there was a mistake, we'll fix it and we'll learn from it. And that's the only way that we were able to build these businesses and create new models and draft new contracts. These things weren't on the shelf. And so that's the key thing that we would have in our teams, is that I wanted people, and I guess we succeeded in that all collectively, that we had people that just dove in there and really were creative.
I think that's relatively enlightened thinking, and that's not to say that there aren't companies that think the same way, but I think that the data points that Pedro is mentioning with where people have gone on to do things, that's proof positive that you do hire people and you don't hire them specifically in some sort of vacuum where they're only going to do certain things and it's super duper siloed. I talked to a chief legal officer the other day of a large public security company, and he was saying something to me it was sort of about our company, a deal we lost several months before I even joined the company, but he was sort of saying the reflection was actually more on us than you, meaning our strictures, our process, all of the things that needed to happen. Like I'm almost saying you're too innovative of a solution for us to have bought, even though many people in the company wanted to buy it. And so it was a cool conversation because he was being very like open and transparent with me. But what you just said, Bert, made me think a lot about that. Like he's in a position of basically saying, I think what I read from that conversation was, I'd like to be more like what Oracle was doing, or I'd like our company to get there. And he's trying to do that inside that company, but it's a big challenge when you've got
Yeah.
a machine.
And it's more than the company itself, but let's think of it from the individual, like a career path, or the well-being or happiness or career growth of any individual. Any business has to scale, right? All of our businesses, 50% year-over-year growth, 100% year, whatever the case be. These are highly growth-oriented, complex, rapidly evolving. So you need to scale. So there's truth to that. But I didn't want to have I didn't want to be part of a team that was going to be really an industrialized process, throughput. A factor of production where our role was just to do this, and we handed off and we stamped, and then we can draw any metaphors of Lucy on the assembly line or what have you. We wanted to do things that were not of that industrial scale. I mean, rather, but much more on the bespoke and creative. Really, kind of the key reason to be a lawyer. Really, to do that kind of innovative and creative part. There was a study years ago, way before I joined at Google, called Project Aristotle, and the goal of it, Aristotle, because there was the quote that he said that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts and all that. So the theory is that through like machine learning, they could identify the optimal team. They can design the dream team. So they will find all the right individuals with the right attributes and bring them together. So they did this study. They interviewed a lot of people. They put people together. They had PhDs and Rhodes Scholars and top universities. And what the result is that it wasn't a high-performing team. And what they learned, it wasn't the individuals themselves, but it was the culture in which individuals operated. And if individuals operated in a culture where they felt safe, they were able to share, they could speak up and collaborate in those kind of ways. That was the definition of a high-performing team, and not the resumes and not all of those credentials if you just sort of assemble it in piece by piece like that.
Have you all read 11? Pedro, have you read 11 Rings, Phil Jackson's book?
No.
It speaks to exactly what Bert just described. So I'll finish what you were saying, but quick recommendation. Obviously that's not a tech company that he was building, but that's an incredible book to read through, that legacy of exactly what Bert was just describing, how you get that team together.
It's interesting to me, like how many companies do the opposite of what Bert just described in commercial legal teams, also privacy legal teams, just like in the legal departments in general, which is to create a sort of like, I love the way you said it, Bert, like kind of an industrial kind of assembly line way of not really practicing law and just kind of pumping out stable, consistent kind of like results that are aligned with, some arbitrary set of rules created infinitely in the past by people who don't work there anymore. Like this is what happens at so many companies. And like that inertia is very comfortable. Like that means you don't have to think, you don't have to be creative, you don't have to be, on the hook for the use of your judgment. And that might be very, comfortable for a lot of people, but I think for the most creative, like deep thinkers, that is incompatible with the way they go about their day. And so it's hard to both have a system that's super formalized and kind of built with industrialized standards, and then also try to hire the best people. I don't think those two things are compatible.
It's a danger sign for the business once it gets into that mode of just doing more of the same. And I don't know the exact numbers. There was some figure north of 50%. The top companies in the year 2000, more than 50% of them are gone. GE, by the way, which I was at for a while, GE Digital, that's a textbook of example of a company. There's a lot of reasons, but one can become you don't want to become an incumbent. And once you get to be an incumbent, it's not just so much of the product, but it's the psychology of it. And you always want to avoid those. And it gets into a lot of these things. Pedro, I know that you're deep into this, but into biases. And I mean these kind of biases, but like of these cognitive biases, is that you kind of are groupthink, and you do what the same, and you get along, and you don't really raise objections, and you want to fit in, and this kind of thing, which in the short term is comfortable and easy and safe, but it's not good for the business, and it's not good for our careers. As lawyers, especially in-house lawyers, especially in big organizations, you really have to take command of what you do, and otherwise you're just going to end up doing more of the same.
How do you do that? You both have been in bigger companies, much bigger companies. It's been a while since I've been in a bigger company, and when I was, it was several thousand people. It wasn't the size of Google and Facebook. So how do you both are and have run teams within larger legal departments. So how do you do what you just said, Bert? How do you stand out? How do you let the organization know we're not making Spacely Sprockets and Cogswell Cogs from the Jetsons? We're here to assist the business in the goals of the business, the broader business. Like, it's not just, well, we sell ads, it's much more than that. How do you stand out?
Yeah, there was a senior vice president at Oracle once that took me aside, and he was a hard-bitten, New York-oriented guy. This guy, gave no quarter to fools, or so. He was a tough-minded guy, but once he got to trust you, he was a really good supporter and friend. And he took me aside once and he said this to me. He said, "I know what all my guys are telling me, all of his reports and like." He says, "But I turn to you because I want to know the truth. I want to know what's really happening." And it really gets to be that type of thing, Andy, where you have to be viewed as a trusted advisor. Relationship building, right? You've got to get out there and get out of your office, virtual or physical, and you've got to start meeting. Pedro is fantastic at this at Oracle and every place he's worked at. Get to know people, your teams, but your executives and other key stakeholders, because it's not just a vertical; it's also cross-functional. And getting to know people, building those relationships, getting those positions of trust, being transparent and telling like it is. One quick story is that there was a fearsome executive, another one at Oracle, and there was a major meeting that person was going to go into, this executive, but the team around, including senior executives, were afraid to tell this individual some of the issues. And I felt it was my duty to go there, and I walked down the hall and I pulled up straightened my shirt, and I knocked on the door, and I just faced her and I said, "There are 3 things you need to know." And she took one of those little Post-it notes, the small ones, and she said, and that person said, "What's the first issue?" That's how I had to describe it in one of those little posts. What's the second issue? What's the third issue? And that person was really thankful that I actually then, nobody else. So you have to have a bit of confidence and bravery. And that's our job. You just got to get out there. And Pedro, I'm sure you've got lots of similar stories.
I've got a good one. My first couple weeks at Oracle had purchased or had acquired BlueKai, the first ad tech buy, I guess, for Oracle. And I remember meeting with Bert in New Jersey for a week. I went up there just to hang out and kind of onboard. And Bert was like, "What do you know about ad tech?" A little bit. And so he's like, all right, cool. Well, you're gonna be our ad tech lead for the team. And I was like, all right, sounds good. And so I get involved in the Blue Kai work. And a couple weeks into the job, there's this very senior meeting. And I'm talking the highest levels of seniority at Oracle. Nobody knows who I am on the meeting except Bert and Bert's boss. Like I'm an anonymous person so far. And somebody says something in the meeting, and I immediately push back, not realizing who it is, and just kind of go on a classic tirade about how that's just not the way to do this, and we should think about this other way. And the response from the exec was, "Who's that speaking?" And I was like, "Oh, this is Pedro. I'm on Bert's team." And he said, the exec said to me, "Are you mad or are you just stupid?" and so anyway, but I went and reiterated my point once again. And then after that meeting, Bert calls me immediately and he's like, "So Pedro, how do you think that went?" And I said, "I don't know, Bert, not so good." I got called mad and stupid in like 10 seconds. And while I definitely needed to calibrate my approach a little bit there, Bert didn't discourage me from speaking up. He could have just been like, "Hey man, be quiet. From now on, just listen. Like that's that person. You can't talk in those meetings until you've been here 10 years." Like that was not the feedback. The feedback was very much aligned with what Bert is suggesting, which is continue to tell the truth, do it in a way that execs are going to be receptive to it, and you'll build trust over time and have great relationships. Well, to that point, that executive who has since left Oracle and is now an extremely powerful person in tech and runs a very powerful organization. And I remain friends to this day, right? And I became a trusted advisor of him. And then when Bert moved on to do other things at other companies, I kind of fell into Bert's role with that person and was a trusted advisor in things in topics that are within my area of expertise, but also just kind of like like a whiteboard kind of ally where we would just talk about more general things that he just wanted a outsider's point of view on. So Bert's totally right, man. Like building trust is important. One of the easiest ways to do that is to, even if you're wrong, have conviction in what you're saying.
There's a nice I don't even want to call it it's almost like a veil of confidentiality that comes with being a lawyer. So when you go get in a room with a person, and you let them, you have to do the things that allow them to feel comfortable up front. So like as Bert said, you have to have a relationship probably before you get to this point. But when you start, and some of that might be pushback, in a sort of friendly way, in discussions, you get to a point where they do feel they have confidentiality with you, and so they will. I remember having this 2 companies ago in really depth with our head of people. It's like a lot of things we had been through a lot, and so there was a lot of like trust there. And I think that's really cool. It's really cool that I think it's really unique for our role that there's this sort of, I don't know, this cloak of confidentiality that sort of flies with you. And if you take care of people, then it buttresses, I think the lawyer's ability to be helpful and be effective in the organization.
But you got to be proactive because it doesn't just happen. If you kind of have to be there for an opportunity and make that happen for you. So life has all these random things. It's interesting when Pedro was recounting that story. Pedro, maybe your whole life, your career would have been different at that right before, because I may have told you at the time, I was considering that your main client support would have been this $500 million managed service business that was highly complex because it was really managing applications of customers. So it had a lot of depth to it, and it was a big growing business. And so I was thinking, okay, we've got this business that needs to be manned, and it's really complicated. But then we got these new ones coming in, and I was thinking, Pedro is not from the usual in-house background. Let's see what he can do with the new business instead of working with the existing one. And so, no detriment on the existing. This is not a value or anything, but other people ended up working on the existing business. And I said, Pedro, you'd be really good at the new business, and you just seized it, man. It's you were there, and you just took it.
No, I appreciate that. And the truth is, there's no way I have the role I have now, but for the opportunity of, or like your vision on Blue Kayak, which later became Datalogics, which later became the entire ad tech stack at Oracle. And you're exactly right. Like, I mean, I had dabbled in some ad tech before, but nothing too serious. Over those 5 years that I supported Oracle Data Cloud, my entire career trajectory changed. And now I run a huge policy team at Facebook. Like, that would not have been the outcome, to your point, but for that decision. So thanks, Bert. I'll send you some flowers after after we're done recording.
Thank you.
But this goes back to the point that we were making earlier, of just kind of your ability to not only seize opportunities for yourself and your team, but for individuals on your team. I mean, Derek Zoner and I have talked about this as well. Like your ability to position Derek well got him what he wanted, to be a GC at he's a GC at an ad tech company, right? And doing excellent. I don't think Mark is the chief privacy officer at Oracle, but for being in the trenches for 3 years on our team, like learning, especially the marketing cloud and data cloud part of Oracle, which is, as we all know, like a high risk, high reward business that requires a lot of attention if you're a chief privacy officer, right? And so Maria from our team, who went on to Google years ago, she's there with you now, right? I think, right? Maria's another one who, was kind of like a quiet negotiator type and has blossomed into, this world-class cloud transactional attorney at Google. So anyway, the legacy goes on and on. I'm going to create like a graph of this. It's just, it's unbelievable, Bert. It's unbelievable what you've been able to do.
In Boston, it's like referred to as like the Belichick coaching tree.
But
I'm not like from here. I just live here, so I don't subscribe to that necessarily. But I think it speaks to stuff that Pedro, you and I talk a lot about, which is the pride you feel as a human in helping people along in their career. There's no points for it other than the points that you score personally that you feel. But to me and us, those are huge. Those may be the most important points that we score. Like, I don't subscribe to the philosophy of, having a person on your team and they don't go to a certain meeting or something like that. Like, to me, that's bullshit. Like, that's just junk. Like, that person, the fact that you were in that meeting and you spoke up, and whether it went well or it didn't go well, the fact that he encouraged you to stay in that meeting is great. Everybody needs to be in the meetings, and those when sometimes when you have someone that's working for you and they keep inviting you to stuff, and finally you have to say, no, you got it. Like, I'm not going to this meeting. There's all these little things that add up to give you score those internal points, and then score points for that person when their career explodes into something amazing, and it may be the best thing we do.
Yeah. Let me give you another example of just enabling. Bert's like talent for enabling others, right? A year, I've always been on like the speaker circuit and done some of that stuff, right? But in the last couple of years, it's really scaled. Like, we have our own podcast, like we've really kind of gone full Hollywood in a sense. But early on, I do like industry panels and the typical stuff. Bert was invited to speak at Princeton. It was Princeton, and he couldn't make it. I don't remember exactly why. I think Bert, you were going on vacation. There's some reason you couldn't make it. I get a random call from Bert, and he's like, "Hey, I've got this thing at Princeton. I'm not going to make it. Are you interested?" I live in Washington, D.C., by the way. And I'm like, "Oh, sure. Send me the details." And I look at him. I'm like, "Yeah, I think I could do this, Bert." And so Bert connects me with the organizers, and I go and I speak for the first time at an Ivy League school, Princeton, obviously. Let me tell you what that led to. That led to speaking engagements at Harvard, at the Harvard Club, at the Yale Club. I've spoken at Berkeley. I've spoken at Boston College. I've spoken at Tufts. The list goes on. And it all started from a little panel that Bert could make at Princeton when those organizers organized lots of things like that. And so for a state school kid like me to go be invited to speak in Boston at the best schools in the world, and then all over the country in front of academics and students is a tremendous privilege. But it just goes back to the point that I'm making, that I'm really trying to emphasize. When you're in charge, and I've only known Bert as being in charge, right? Like, he was my boss, my first boss, and he's been obviously a leader most of the time, all the time I've known him. That is his way of operating. Like, it's constant enablement. You know who else is really good at this? Andy, you. Like, you're really good at this too. Is like finding links between people and things they'd probably be interested and shine at, and then pointing them or nudging them, in the case of Bert, kind of pushing me to do certain things in the right direction. And I've learned that from you guys, and I try to do the same thing. And if more of us were like this, where we really were just thinking about how we can help others achieve their goals, even if they haven't identified those goals yet, you just see something in them that suggests they'd be really great at one thing or another. If we spent more time doing that for each other, man, like we'd all be rock stars. It'd be amazing.
Bert, where'd you pick it up? Because where'd you pick that up? And go back a little bit in your career. Obviously, you were leading teams when we were talking about it, but before that, you weren't always the leader of the team. So how did you pick that up, and then how did you kind of develop that?
It's interesting. That's a great question. Never really thought of where sort of where the Nile begins, I guess, sort of the source of the Nile. But when I was a litigator, I had a couple of partners, and I was thinking of this before our conversation today, and they, there was a couple things I learned from each of these partners, and one of which is don't be afraid of making a mistake, acceptable losses, and then and another partner basically said, taught me that in law firm life or litigation, you typically want to find the right answer, but then you realize there's not always a right answer. So I kind of culturally, also for me, is that there are a lot of different paths. And there's a lot of different ways to accomplish something. And winning, I think Derek Zollner said this, because I did watch your conversation with him. And Derek Zollner was saying is that you can win a case, but that may not necessarily be fulfilling for the client or even the attorney. So it's really then the goal is to empower. You want to empower yourself. You want to empower those around you. You want to grow, but to do that, you need to have the safety and the confidence around you, and working with the right team. I tell you, Andy, is that I took a really bad job once, which I don't want to go into what it was, but it was I ignored all of the red flags, and I went into this company. And I intellectualized it to say, well, I can do great stuff, and I really didn't like the culture at all. It was a bad fit, and so I left pretty soon after. For me personally, good company, but not for me. And it really then it told me that culture matters, and your team matters, and the people you interact matters, and that has to work for you. So I've always viewed that I wanted to create that for others. I didn't want to go somewhere and sit back and be like this and complain if it wasn't done for me, because it won't ever be done for you. Nobody's going to manage your own career or your own. You've got to do that yourself, and you've got to be proactive, and you've got to create even the microculture we talked about. So that's kind of how I evolved. I was always very kind of business minded. I wasn't. I did an MBA along with my law degree, so I was always kind of really interested in the execution and growth part of business plus law, and then plus tech.
I've learned a ton from, I don't want to say the word bad experiences, but I've learned a ton from not just mistakes. I think everybody sort of learns from their mistakes, but like as you described, Bert, like a decision that I made to go do something and go do a job, and it may not crater you or anything, but it's always this really interesting learning experience that informs a lot of stuff. My first job in a law firm was unenjoyable for a lot of reasons, and without it, I don't have the job I have now. So it's all kind of dominoes in a certain way, good and bad. So I find that interesting too. I think the bad experiences.
I've definitely found myself in the same position Bert was in. I ignored red flags, took a job that I had intellectualized as something that would be good for me to do, and hated it and instantly. Like, it wasn't even one of those things where it was like, oh, I realized this was a mistake over time. Like, day one, I knew it was not going to be good. And it's always cultural. It's always cultural. The work is the same in most places, or at least similar, but like, it was cultural, and great company, great people, smart, very successful, but just not a good fit for my personality, for my way of operating. And it's hard to have the courage to be like, okay, I'm going to take a mulligan on this one and go find something else. I mean, that's really what you have to decide to do. And it takes a certain level of either insanity or courage to just break away, because the sensible part of you is thinking, do the year, do the 2 years, do whatever. And like, I just didn't have that in me. I mean, a year, I have only got a finite amount of time that I'm going to be able to do what we do. And I'm not going to spend a significant period doing something that I'm not enjoying for protocol, unless I absolutely have to. And none of us are we're all very lucky. We're not in positions to have to do anything. And so totally appreciate where both of you are coming from on that. Also, they're great learning experiences, because I'll never ignore red flags again. It'll never happen again. And I've been, never again. And I've been very lucky, like the last couple companies I've worked at. I mean, it's hard to beat Salesforce and Facebook. I mean, culturally, these are great places to be, full of really smart people. And that brings me to the question I have for you, Bert, which is, you obviously work at a big logo. You work at Google, and Google is always thought of as like a highly desirable place to work, comp and culture and innovation and things like that. Having been at this longer than most of us, or Andy and I, like, what's your experience been like at Google, coming in sort of as an incumbent? You're not there to learn. You're there, well, of course you're there to learn, but I guess you're also there to teach in a way. So what's that experience like? How's Google? Do you like it? How do you like it? And what makes it unique to you?
So I had exactly 10 business days physically at Google before all of so it is kind of, we won't get into the whole work from home thing, but but that is actually sort of notable with this experience. And who would have known, if you would have seen me on my nuclear orientation in this big auditorium in February with I don't know, 200-300 people and all that, it would have been like, to see that now would have been like, run for your life. But so we were all there.
Did you say nuclear?
Nuclear.
Yeah. You've never heard that? Like, you've never heard that?
There we go. Everyone gets it. Everyone gets it.
That is fantastic. I've never heard of that. That's fantastic.
Yeah. Do you get the hat? It's a whole thing, man. It's a whole thing.
You got to see the movie, the Internship, I think it was called. So that takes place. But so putting aside the work from home, I'll tell you, they hired me because Google and especially Google Cloud, needed to change their culture. They've got a great culture existing for all the things that you've just said, Pedro. But what they're looking to do in these last couple of years, and especially in this last year and going forward, is to have an enterprise mindset. It was always very consumer oriented, and they were having success, but they wanted greater success in terms of speaking to the markets when it came to especially regulated and large companies such as banks and public sector, healthcare, and all the big companies. They weren't good at connecting with those companies. So when Thomas Kurian came from Oracle, and you remember Thomas, he looked to hire some of the best people in the industry, from business side, from technical side, very big hiring in Google Cloud. And then he also sponsored some build up for the legal team. And I was tagged as one of the people to help. So I came in and I'm here as a little bit of a change agent. to help grow and do all this great stuff, but also culturally advance the company, and especially Google Cloud, to be much more customer empathetic, a little bit more execution oriented, a little bit more getting to yes, and getting to close business in collaborative ways, which they always were. Great culture, but as companies are shifting from pure consumer to enterprise, that was the entree for me to come in.
We just bought Looker though, and I couldn't get an indemnity, so
Yeah.
I don't know that I don't agree. Well, I'm joking, but the truth is, a service like Looker is a very good example, and there's then infinite spikes off of Google Cloud that will create B2B business opportunity, I'm sure.
I love like I'm a big Thomas Fearon fan, and Bert and I worked with him. He may or may not have been referenced in some of the stories we just told. But what's interesting about TK Thomas is that everything you just said, Bert, that Google is trying to evolve toward is you and him personified. Like that. So it's like it's one thing to say, hey, we want to change our approach a little bit to speak the language of the enterprise and understand and be compassionate and empathetic towards their specific needs, which are different than consumers. And it's another thing to execute on it. And I can just tell by the hires, like just by the hires, that Google means business, which is Google means business. So that's an interesting, but like that's the execution level there just seems high when Google decides we're going in this direction. They just somehow do it. They just somehow do it.
Yeah.
Well, we could talk to you forever, Bert, but I think we have to jet off into the future.
Well, I look forward to seeing you.
Pedro,
I gotta get to the infinite calls I have the rest of the day. But Bert, I can't wait to see you in person, man. I appreciate your friendship so much and your mentorship, and congratulations on the Google move. And yeah, man, like
absolutely.
Happy that you joined us. Yeah.
And as I sign off here, I do want to answer one question you asked me way before: Yankees or Red Sox? I'm from the Bronx. I went to the Bronx High School of Science. It is Yankees all the way.
Well, I was saying to a friend, so I'm from Baltimore, and I now live in Boston. And I said to somebody, it was like, well, actually one of our board members, I said, at what point am I allowed to change? Like, I've been here 8 years, and the Orioles are making it very, very hard to continue to be a fan. So I appreciate your fandom of the Yankees goes back to your childhood. So I appreciate that for sure.
The only outcome I want from a Yankees Red Sox game is a forfeit. Just by both teams. Like I just hate them both. But yeah, shout out to the Bronx, Bert.
Yep. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for coming.
Okay. Thank you for having me. Take care.
Yep.